For 12 years, Thomas Ghost Reardon mopped the floors of the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters in Coronado. To the young SEALs who strutted past him with their fresh tridents and combat ribbons, he was just another janitor, invisible, forgettable, pushing a bucket on wheels through corridors where America's most elite warriors planned their operations. At 73, his body still moved with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades training it to be a weapon. His hands, scarred and weathered, gripped the mop handle with the same unconscious competence they'd once gripped a dive knife or an M4. But nobody looked close enough to notice. Nobody ever did. Then, at 0247 hours on a Tuesday morning, everything changed. The smell of electrical fire, flames crawling up walls, 50 personnel trapped behind locked doors as smoke filled the intelligence section, and an old janitor who dropped his mop and became something else entirely, something the young SEALs had forgotten could exist in a man past 70. This is the story of the Silent Frogman, the legend who never stopped serving. The night shift suited Thomas just fine. He started at 2200 hours, when most of the command staff had gone home, when the hallways were empty except for the occasional duty officer or late-working intel analyst. He wore the standard contractor uniform, navy blue coveralls with facility services embroidered on the back, work boots worn soft from years of use, and a faded ball cap that hid most of his silver hair. The building he cleaned held memories in every corner. Third floor, East Wing, where they debriefed him after Somalia in '93. Second floor conference room, where he'd received his third Bronze Star. The training pool in the basement, where he'd done his first drown-proofing evolution 48 years ago as a terrified BUDS candidate who had no idea if he'd make it through the next 5 minutes, let alone the next 5 months. He'd retired as a Master Chief Petty Officer in 2012 after 32 years. SEAL Team 3, Team 6 before it became DevGru, operations in the Gulf War, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, 3 tours hunting high-value targets in the mountains, 2 Bronze Stars with a V device for valor, a Navy Cross he never talked about for an operation in Mogadishu that was still classified, and a trident that meant more to him than any medal ever could. After retirement, he'd tried civilian life, tried sitting in a house his wife had left him after 20 years of deployments had turned their marriage into a polite arrangement between strangers, tried consulting work that made him feel like a fraud, selling war stories to defense contractors who wanted the SEAL mystique without the reality. It lasted 8 months before the silence drove him nearly insane. So he'd come back, not as an operator, those days were over, but as a janitor, someone who could be near the teams without being of the teams, someone who could serve in the only way he knew how. It happened at 0247 hours. Thomas was on the 4th floor, working his way through the administrative offices, when he smelled it. Not the cleaning solution he was using, but something else, something wrong. Electrical fire, his brain identified instantly. The smell that came before the smoke, before the flames, before things went catastrophically bad. He dropped the mop and moved toward the scent, his stride shifting from the shuffle of an old janitor to something quicker, more purposeful. The smell was coming from a utility closet near the server room. He opened the door and saw flames already crawling up the wall, feeding on old wiring and paper storage boxes that someone had stashed there against every fire code regulation. His hand was on his radio before conscious thought caught up. Facility services to Command Duty Officer. We have a fire. 4th floor, North Corridor, server room utility closet. Flames visible, spreading rapidly. Initiate evacuation protocols. The response was immediate. Copy that. Activating fire suppression and building evacuation. Fire department notified. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Thomas's mind ran the calculations automatically. The server room contained classified materials and sensitive equipment. The fire was already through the utility closet and into the drop ceiling. The 4th floor housed the intelligence section, 50 personnel working the night shift, analyzing operations, processing real-time data from teams deployed in 3 different theaters. And the fire alarm, when it started blaring, would trigger the automatic door locks on the server room to protect classified materials. Standard protocol, except those doors locked from the outside. Anyone in that section would be trapped. He was moving before the thought finished forming. Down the corridor at a run, his knees screaming protest, his lungs already laboring. The fire alarm started its deafening wail, and he heard the magnetic locks engage with heavy clicks that echoed through the hallway. Behind the reinforced doors of the intelligence section, he could hear voices rising in confusion and panic. The door control panel showed red, locked. Override required command authorization or a physical master key that took 15 minutes to retrieve from the duty officer's safe. Behind the door, smoke was already beginning to seep through the ventilation system. He could hear coughing, voices shouting, someone screaming about being trapped. Thomas looked at the panel, looked at the door, looked at his hands. Then he reached up and pulled off the panel cover, exposing the wiring and circuit boards underneath. His fingers moved with muscle memory from a lifetime of technical training, hot-wiring vehicles in hostile territory, bypassing security systems, and improvising solutions when the gear failed and the mission still needed to be accomplished. The lock disengaged with a click. He yanked the door open and smoke poured out, thick and black and toxic. Through it, he could see the intelligence section, 50 desks, wall-mounted displays showing operations worldwide, and personnel stumbling toward the exit, some already on their hands and knees, others helping colleagues who'd been overcome by smoke inhalation. "Everyone out! Move, move, move!" His voice cut through the chaos with command authority that hadn't diminished in 11 years away from the teams. Not the voice of a janitor, the voice of a master chief who'd led men through worse than this, who'd trained his entire life to function when everything went to hell. They responded instinctively to that voice, that tone, forming up into something resembling order even through their panic and confusion. Thomas grabbed the nearest person, a young lieutenant who'd frozen in fear, and physically pushed her toward the emergency exit. "Stairs, not elevators. Go, go, go!" He moved through the smoke, counting heads with the same automatic discipline that had kept his swim buddy next to him in pitch-black water, that had ensured no man got left behind on extractions under fire. 43, 44, 45 visible and moving, 5 unaccounted for. The smoke was getting thicker, the heat building, the flames now visible through the doorway where the fire had spread from the utility closet into the main corridor. He found them in the back corner. 3 intel analysts and 2 junior officers, overcome by smoke, collapsed at their stations. Thomas pulled a t-shirt from a gym bag someone had left on a desk, doused it with water from a cooler, and wrapped it around his face. Then he grabbed the first person, a petty officer who couldn't have weighed more than 120, threw her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry that his back immediately protested, and moved toward the exit. 2 trips, 3, 4. His lungs were burning, his vision starting to blur from smoke inhalation, but he kept moving because that's what you did. You kept moving until everyone was out or you couldn't move anymore. There was no middle ground, no acceptable alternative. The 5th person was a commander, a big man who'd been sitting closest to where the smoke had poured in. Thomas grabbed him under the arms and started dragging him toward the door. Halfway there, a ceiling tile crashed down in a shower of sparks and burning debris. He kept moving. 3 feet from the exit, his legs finally gave out, the years and the smoke and the exertion catching up to him all at once. He fell, still gripping the commander, and his vision started to gray at the edges. "This is it," he thought with a strange sense of calm. Not a bad way to go. Better than most. Serving, doing the job. Then hands were on him, strong hands, young hands, pulling him and the commander through the doorway into clearer air. Fire suppressant foam was spraying from ceiling nozzles, coating everything in white chemical clouds. Someone was putting an oxygen mask on his face, someone else was checking his pulse, and through the confusion he heard a voice he recognized. "Jesus Christ, that's Master Chief Reardon! That's Ghost! What the hell is he doing here?" Thomas woke up in the base hospital 6 hours later with smoke inhalation, second-degree burns on his hands and forearms, and a doctor who informed him he was the luckiest 73-year-old idiot she'd ever treated. He'd saved 5 lives directly and 45 more by getting that door open. 0 casualties. Everyone out. They released him after 24 hours of observation. He expected to go back to a small apartment, to sleep off the exhaustion and the pain, and then return to work in a few days when his hands healed enough to grip a mop again. Instead, he found his apartment had been invaded by SEALs. Not just any SEALs, active duty operators from Team 3, where he'd spent the majority of his career. They'd set up a watch rotation, someone there around the clock to make sure he didn't need anything, to keep him company, to listen if he wanted to talk, or sit in comfortable silence if he didn't. On the third day, Command Master Chief Kyle Hansen showed up. Hansen was the senior enlisted advisor for all of Naval Special Warfare, the most senior NCO in the SEAL community. He wore his uniform, his chest heavy with ribbons from 2 decades of combat operations, and he carried a manila folder. "Master Chief," Hansen said, settling into the chair across from Thomas with the easy confidence of a man who'd earned his place through blood and water. "We need to talk about your job." "I'm cleared to return to work next week," Thomas said. "Doctor signed off on it. Hands are healing fine." "That's not what I mean." Hansen opened the folder, pulled out a document. "You've been working as a janitor for 12 years, $11.50 an hour, no benefits beyond the basic contractor package, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in National City. Master Chief, what the hell are you doing?" Thomas shrugged. "Serving, same as always, just in a different capacity." "You saved 50 people 4 days ago. You bypassed a secure lock, conducted a rescue operation under fire, performed 5 casualty evacuations while suffering from smoke inhalation, and you're telling me you've been mopping floors for 12 years? While wearing your trident under your coveralls?" Thomas looked down. He hadn't realized the shirt had torn during the rescue, exposing the gold pin he wore on an undershirt every day. The trident, the only thing that mattered. "Nobody asked," he said simply. "I'm just another contractor, another old guy cleaning up after the operators. I didn't need recognition. I just needed purpose." Hansen was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what the guys are calling you now? The young SEALs who've been walking past you for 12 years without seeing you?" "I can imagine. They're calling you the Silent Frogman, the ghost who's been watching over them the whole time, invisible but always there. And Master Chief, they're ashamed. Every operator in this command is ashamed that we walked past you for 12 years and never saw you, never asked, never looked beyond the coveralls." "That's not their fault." "It is," Hansen interrupted firmly. "It is our fault. We talk about brotherhood, about never leaving a man behind, about the teams being a family. But we left you behind, Master Chief. We let you disappear into the background because it was easier not to see you than to acknowledge what you represent, what we all hope we won't become. The operator who ages out, who's no longer useful, who gets forgotten." Thomas didn't have an answer for that. Hansen pulled out another document. "The Admiral wants to see you tomorrow at 0900, full dress uniform. This is not a request, Master Chief. This is an order." The next morning, Thomas stood outside the Admiral's office wearing service dress blues he hadn't put on in over a decade. The uniform still fit, mostly, a little tighter in the waist, looser in the shoulders. His trident gleamed on his chest, positioned exactly where it should be, 1/4 inch above the ribbons that represented 32 years of service. The door opened and Hansen motioned him inside. The Admiral's office was designed to intimidate, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific, walls covered with photos of SEAL operations going back to Vietnam, a desk made from wood salvaged from a World War II landing craft. And behind that desk, Vice Admiral James Thornton, a 2-star who'd come up through the teams and still had the bearing of an operator. But it wasn't just the Admiral. The office was full. Command Master Chiefs from every SEAL team, senior officers. And sitting in the front row, 5 people Thomas didn't recognize, until he looked closer and realized they were the intel analysts and officers he'd pulled from the fire, now in their dress uniforms, standing at attention. "Master Chief Reardon," Admiral Thornton said, coming around the desk. "Thank you for coming. At ease, everyone." The room settled. Thomas remained standing, uncertain. "Master Chief, I've been reviewing your personnel file. 32 years of service, operations in every major conflict since the First Gulf War, 3 Bronze Stars, 2 with V-device, a Navy Cross that's still classified for an op in Mogadishu that apparently involved you alone, holding a position for 6 hours against hostile forces while extraction assets were delayed. You saved 11 lives that day. The citation says you were wounded twice and refused medical evacuation until your team was safe. The Admiral paused, looking at Thomas with an expression that was part respect, part anger. And for the last 12 years, you've been mopping our floors for barely above minimum wage. Why, Master Chief? Help me understand why. Thomas took a breath. Sir, I retired because my body couldn't do the job anymore, but my mind could. My heart could. I tried civilian life and it nearly killed me. Not from danger, but from lack of purpose. I needed to serve. I needed to be near the teams. This was the only way I knew how. By disappearing? The Admiral asked quietly. By making yourself invisible? By continuing to serve, sir. Those young SEALs walking those hallways, they're planning operations that will put their lives on the line. They're making decisions about tactics and strategy and risk. I figured if I was there, even just cleaning the floors they walk on, maybe I was still contributing, still part of something larger than myself, still a frogman, even if nobody knew it. One of the intel analysts stood up, the young lieutenant he'd pushed toward the exit first. Sir, permission to speak. Granted. Master Chief Reardon didn't just save our lives 4 nights ago, he's been saving us for 12 years. Every night when we're working late, stressed out, dealing with situations that are life and death for the teams deployed downrange, he was there. We never saw him as anything more than the janitor, but he saw us. He noticed when someone was working too late and would leave a bottle of water on their desk. He noticed when someone was struggling and would do something small, straighten their workspace, leave a note saying, "Stay focused," anything to help. We thought it was facility services being nice. It was him. It was always him, taking care of us the way he took care of his men in the teams. The Admiral nodded slowly. Master Chief Reardon, I'm hereby offering you a position as Senior Enlisted Advisor for Tactical Operations. It's a GS-14 civilian position, full benefits, office on the 3rd floor, and your job will be to advise command staff and team leaders on operational planning from the perspective of someone who's been there and done that. Thomas shook his head. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm 73 years old. I don't have the qualifications for. You're the most qualified person in this building, the Admiral interrupted. You've lived it. You've led in combat. You understand what service means at the most fundamental level. But, sir, if I take an office, a title, I become visible. I become someone the young guys have to salute, have to treat differently. Right now, I'm just there. I can observe without changing the dynamics. I can see how they really are when they don't think anyone important is watching. The Admiral studied him for a long moment. You want to stay invisible. I want to stay useful, sir. And for me, that means serving the way I know how. Quietly, without recognition. Just being there. Then we'll do it differently. The Admiral turned to Hansen. Master Chief Hansen, effective immediately, I want a program established. The Silent Service Initiative. We'll bring in retired senior enlisted, the ones who want to stay connected to the teams but don't want formal positions. We'll create roles as advisors, mentors, observers. They'll have access to the building, to operations briefings, to training evolutions. They'll be there to offer guidance when asked, to share experience, to remind us of what we're supposed to be. And we'll pay them properly, treat them with respect, and make sure every operator in this command knows who they are and what they've done. He looked back at Thomas. You don't want recognition, Master Chief. I respect that. But you're going to accept fair compensation and proper access. You're going to stop mopping floors and start doing what you're actually here for. Being a guardian, a mentor, a reminder of what the teams are supposed to represent. You can stay as invisible as you want to the outside world, but inside this command, every SEAL is going to know your name, your story, and what you mean to this community. Thomas felt his throat tighten. "Sir, I don't need. This isn't about what you need, Master Chief. It's about what we need. We need men like you visible enough to teach us, to guide us, to keep us honest. The teams can't afford to forget their history, their values, their foundation. And you, Master Chief, you are that foundation." One by one, the officers and enlisted in the room stood, not at attention, but in respect. The 5 people he'd saved from the fire came forward, each shaking his hand, each saying words that blurred together through the emotion Thomas was trying very hard to control. "You saved my life. Thank you, Master Chief. I'm naming my son after you. You showed me what it means to be a SEAL." Admiral Thornton extended his hand. "Welcome home, Master Chief. You never left the teams. We just forgot to see you. That ends today." Thomas Reardon still shows up at the Naval Special Warfare Command every morning at 0800. He doesn't mop floors anymore. Instead, he sits in on operations briefings, walks through the training areas, talks with young SEALs about leadership and fear and the weight of responsibility. He wears civilian clothes, jeans, polo shirts, the same faded ball cap, and his trident visible now on his chest. The young operators call him Master Chief. The officers seek his counsel, and every new Buds class, during their first week of training, hears the story of the Silent Frogman, the SEAL who never stopped serving, who saved 50 lives at 73, who proved that the trident doesn't represent what you can do at your physical peak, but who you are at your core. He's no longer invisible, but he's still quiet, still watchful, still taking care of the people around him in 1,000 small ways that most will never notice. Because that's what frogmen do. They serve, they endure, they take care of their brothers, not for recognition or reward, but because that's who they are. From the depths of the ocean to the heights of honor, the Silent Frogman reminds us that the truest service is often the quietest, and that legends walk among us, invisible until the moment we need them most. The only easy day was yesterday. This story is dedicated to all the veterans who continue to serve their communities quietly, without recognition, simply because service is who they are. To those who wear their pride not on their sleeves, but in their hearts. To the silent frogmen who walk among us.